why do we as humans, why are we so obsessed with what people think of us and how people perceive us?
It's interesting you say as humans, isn't it, as opposed to as something else. Maybe not just humans. So what's the question? Why do we say it again?
Why are we so attached to what people think of us and how people perceive us?
Why are we so attached to how people perceive us, what people think about us? Well, you know, we want to make an impression, don't we? And we are, when you establish a self-identity, you separate yourself. It's another thing. I mean, you do it when you're about 4, psychologically. That's the time. You get a sense of yourself. So you have these different senses like seeing, hearing, smelling, all those kinds of things. But there's arguably a 6th sense, which is a sense of I. And you efficiently and thoroughly achieve that around 4 or not. Some people don't have such a very good sense of I. But what happens in that process is you separate yourself from everything, so you reinforce the fear. Because if you're not integrated, and if you're not a part of a community or the world community or the universe or life itself, nature, all of which you are, so to speak, a part of, then you actually put yourself in a very vulnerable position. And that vulnerable position then depends on what other people think of you. They think you're great, or you're worth feeding, or worth supporting, or worth bolstering in all sorts of ways, then your survival is assured. And if, fundamentally, you're not thought to be worthy in the values of those around you, then you're under threat. So the vulnerability is very real. From the moment which you establish a sense of separate self, separate I, 2 things happen. You're separative, you have to see everything else as differentiated. Not only people, but also now I'm not part of nature, I'm not part of this, I'm not part of that. And yet you yearn and long to be. And we tend to put that on a relationship, maybe a primary love relationship. And we're also divided, so there's this divisiveness. We're not part of the rest of life, we're somehow in conflict with it all. Therefore, it's fundamental, it's base chakra survival concerns that I will only survive if you like me, in a sense. So we go around throughout our adolescence, later childhood actually, but adolescence, and certainly the 20s, in a state of fear that will I get rejected to the point that I'll actually be discarded in some kind of way. It's a primitive feeling, but of course it survives. I mean, why is it the person even in their 50s may come to therapy and they say, I'm really worried that I will lose all my money and I'll wind up in the gutter and I won't be able to survive. And you say, well look, there's a social security system in place, there's good people, there's family, but there's still this primitive feeling that you somehow won't survive. As nonsensical as it actually is in the West. So fundamentally it's a base chakra concern to do with survival, right?
Yeah.
You really, 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 really want to live, before anything else, before meaning the sense of existence and actually sustaining your life is a fundamental base chakra concern. So you better,
Word every time.
What?
That word, base chakra.
You know what I mean by base chakra?
No, I do know what
right?
you mean, but it's just funny.
It's that place right down there where you're terrified.
Yeah.
You're not terrified up here or even here in the middle of your body.
It's
when you,
like right at the base.
when you feel fear, it's right down there. Right? And we know that, for example, if somebody comes up to you with a knife or a gun in an alley, you may actually lose control of your base chakra energy system. You may wear yourself because you're so under threat. You lose all of that. It all goes. That's where you feel it. That's where survival and the continuance of your life is. So it's worth thinking about, when you're going to a party, you're going to a social gathering, or you take part in any collective endeavour, we're asking for people to like us, and all those cues that give smiles and hey, you're good or you're acceptable and all of this. Because at some point in maturity, however, you better shed it, because you're not really under threat anymore. We're not in the 10th century, 11th century. We're not living under a feudal, and maybe we are in some ways, but to all intents and purposes, it's anachronistic. It's a primitive fear. And that, like most fears today, don't really have any place. You're assured of existing. But in time, as you mature and in the right stage of life, become self-referring. But by which I mean it doesn't matter what anybody thinks of you. I'm going to be myself, even if everybody turns around and says, hey, you're rubbish. Because if you sell yourself out, you've just taken all the ground from beneath you, and it does catch up with you. So that happens around 40.
Okay.
It's still a stage of development where you are urged as an inner impulse to be yourself, regardless of if your partner or your family or friends or acquaintances think it's a good idea. You just stand by it because it's true for you. And so then you no longer need to please anybody. You're going, at your young age, you're going towards a place where you're mature, and it doesn't matter what people think of you, you're going to be yourself. Otherwise it's a life not led, you see. What does that make you think of, anyway?
Well, it's just kind of like, I don't know, it's just interesting, that relationship between like our animalistic self and our like more conscious self, and if that can, because I know you can train it, like you can work with your, you like recreate behaviour patterns and recreate, like, I don't know what the word is, like just a new way of thinking. So, but it's hard work, like that's what it makes me think of. And it's quite scary that you say it isn't till 40 that it then becomes an animal instinct to just then accept yourself. Yeah, but it's interesting.
It's not perhaps an animal instinct at 40 to do it, it's the age at which the urge kicks in, a little bit like puberty, a little bit like what happens when you're 7 and 8 and you're incarnated, a little bit like what happens when you're in your early 20s, and there's a time for it. But for me it was 35, so it was kind of a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
And for you it could be earlier, and in rare cases it can be a lot earlier.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying the mean average is more or less around 40, because it really is uncomfortable to be out of alignment with yourself as you're maturing into life through 4 decades. It's long enough to grow up. So.
Yeah. Interesting stuff.
And the other thing is, the way you said it just now reminds me of ahimsa. You know what ahimsa is? Ahimsa is habit. It's a Sanskrit word. It means habit, and it's very close to sin in our English word. And sin, therefore, if you correlate those words, is a life spent in habit, himsa.
Yeah.
And you strive for ahimsa, which means not a life that's predictable or repetitive. And you're right, it's hard. It's much harder than just being an automaton and just living life according to emotional behavioural patterns that you inherited, probably from your family, from your parents, from that early life.
Yeah. Or have taught yourself, that you've learned through
or
sustained.
were taught, or conformed to in your conditioning. Yeah. So no, it is hard. It's hard to stand up on your own, but ahimsa, which is not habit, is that's life. Because if you keep just doing things that you just taught by rote, you pick them up and you're really imitating, and you're actually living somebody else's life.
Yeah.
Maybe not you, but people do that.
Yeah.
So avoid himsa, habit, sin.
Habit.
Being ungrateful for your life, really. Just doing things that are...
It's hard work, though, to not... I thought you were waving. To not, to not. What was I saying? It's hard work to notice yourself, and the way you think, and like sometimes I'm really like, oh, I recognise the fact that I could make a choice not to rely so much on this person's opinion, but at the same time, like, there's so much else going on in my head, emotionally, or I'm tired, and then it's like I just don't have the energy to, because it takes a lot of energy to kind of sit with that thing of like, okay, and work through what's actually going on.
But only for a while. You are naturally, you can't go against your nature, otherwise it is exhausting.
Yeah.
And so what you're describing is that at some point throughout your conditioning, you were separated from your nature, maybe when you had this self-sense.
Yeah.
And then it takes an effort to get back to your nature. But if you consider your nature is awareness, you're just naturally aware. When you were 3, you were just naturally. No one taught you to be aware. When you were 2.5, you were naturally aware. When you're nearly 5, you're just naturally aware. Round here, the rot sets in, and you start to be divorced from what you really are, or your nature. And you're right, it does then take effort to get back to awareness. But if you don't embrace that awareness, you're not really being yourself.
Yeah.
And once you've put the effort in to regaining your awareness, it's just free fall. It's really easy. It's really easy. So what you're doing is you're tuning up.
How long does it take to to come back to your awareness?
Much less time when you're as young as you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, but say you're as old as I am and you're just starting, then that's really hard. Older people tend to be a bit more fixed. You notice that, so they've got a long history of being intransigent. They're stuck in the patterns and so on. So, but when you're young, it's much easier, as long so long as you're motivated. The other thing about being young is there's insecurity and needing to fit in and belong and all of that. So you want to be about as aware, as real as your peer group or something. But if you're willing to step outside of that, and you understand that your real nature is awareness, then it's really not so very difficult. It's not so hard.
Yeah.
Generally speaking.
I've really recognised the fact that so many of my peer groups are they're just not aware. So in order for me to be aware, I have to separate myself from them, and that's quite isolating as well, extremely isolating. Yeah.
So what you have is a balance between being accepted by your peer group with the price you have to pay in order to achieve that acceptance, and being acceptable to yourself, because sooner or later that choice will be compulsive, it will be compelling, because there comes times in life where I don't know who you are, and it's absolutely crucial and critical that you sort yourself out at that point. And belonging to a peer group is not much good if it's not you who's belonging. So at any age, it's just true. It makes sense. Be aware, be yourself, be in touch with your true nature, and then from that sense of self, by all means, belong or fit into your peer group. But if you are seeing that your peer group are not terribly conscious, aware, then already you're aware, aren't you? Just the way you're talking about it, you're obviously aware.
But it's also exhausting, because it's just exhausting, because it's so hard to find people who are on the same level as me, on the same awareness as me, and by being this aware, it isolates you completely.
So what do? You choose to belong rather than to be yourself? Or?
That's what I'm still working on right now. Choosing where the line, where, if I want to sacrifice a part of myself to be in this peer group, have these friends, or whether I'm happy to recognise the fact that I am on a different level to them. I'm on a different journey to them, and we can't travel the journey together, or whether that's just completely ridiculous, because just because they're on a different level doesn't mean that, you know, it's just finding that, and yeah, it's just finding, it's just, I don't know the answer, but
Don't you
working
then?
it.
Maybe you do.
I don't know. Maybe
And
I
sooner
do.
or later you have to choose yourself, don't you?
Yeah. But then it's kind of that thing of like, by choosing myself and isolating myself, I create a world that, you know, a smaller group of friends, a smaller group of peers, and then that's I don't think that's very healthy either, you know. And I think everybody should, just because I'm on a different level to somebody else doesn't mean that, like, I could show them, you know, I could like their thing, they could see me being all around, and that could make them step forward a little bit, and then, but then I think that's always like, I'm always like that. I always think that I can help people, but I, you know, I can't. But you always kind of can, but I don't
You see, that's also aware. I mean, that's something that people a lot older than you don't know,
know.
which is you can't help anyone
Mm.
because you can't change anyone for them. You can't do their practice, their inner work, their, you know, evolving them or something. You can't do that for them. But
Yeah.
you see, in that you have a very mature insight,
Mm.
what you've just said.
I'm told that all the time. I'm an old soul. I
Maybe,
think,
you know,
yeah.
but whatever, you know, be yourself, because at some point it's going to be critical and it'll get you. And oddly enough, if you are, you will be a light. You might help, you might not help, but you might change something, who knows, but people will be drawn to you. Because what do you think your peer group really want? You know, anything that they want is already inside them actually, and you know that probably better than they do.
Yeah.
So they will tend to be drawn to you for your being yourself. That's enough. And who knows, maybe you spend time with older people for a while, or more, you know, more
Yeah.
aware people, let's say,
Yeah.
something like that.
No, well, it's kind of like, you can find them. They're just not. There aren't that many of them.
No,
Yeah.
there's not that many of us.
No. Which is really scary.
Yeah,
And yeah,
but maybe there's enough.
I don't know. I think there can always be more.
Well, maybe you're one of them, and you need to be yourself.
Yeah.